Good evening, everyone. This is a very popular webinar. We have about 300 people registered for this event, so everyone's so excited to see you tonight, Clint. I am here with Clint Coons from Anderson Advisors, and he's going to be talking to us about asset protection specifically related to residential assisted living. And obviously that's a very popular topic. All of you are here to see that tonight. If you have questions throughout the presentation, there is a questions tab in your control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any technical difficulties, anything you need help with, I will try and help you there. But also keep in mind, I'm going to send you the recording tomorrow. So everyone that is having any issues, you can get this from me tomorrow. So don't you worry about it too much. So tonight, Clint Coons is here with us. I mentioned that, so you can go ahead and take things away. I'm going to start the presentation for you right now, and then we can get going.
Perfect.
Oh, I gotta go back to the start. Here we go. Here we go, everyone.
Awesome. All right. All right, welcome everyone. It's a new year. It's great to start off the year with this type of planning because, you know, at the end of the year when you try to plan for what you did back in January, it makes it really difficult. There's not a lot of planning that can go into it. And it's amazing how many people actually wait. I just got the phone call earlier this morning with an individual who was telling me how frustrated they were because they couldn't get their business set up on December 21st and do planning for 2020. And, you know, you listen to people talk about that, and you feel empathy for them, but part of me wants to say, why didn't you do this in January, right? At this point in time, it is obviously way too late. Well, the reason you're on here today is because we're going to teach you about the important steps that you should be following right now to make sure that your assets are protected, that your business is set up. Because if you're going to go into residential assisted living, there are a few key things that you want to make sure that you're setting up the right way. Because if you do it right, it's going to make it a lot easier down the road for you when it comes to running your business. Because there's more to setting up a residential assisted living than just considering the asset protection standpoint. There's taxes to consider, and the fact that it is a business and that you're going to want to expand at some point in time. You're going to want to work with lenders. So you want to make sure that you're balancing all of this out in putting together your structure so it allows you to move the ball forward. I talk to a lot of people who want to use certain strategies in their planning that may sound good on paper, that they hear about on the internet, or they've been to a webinar like this and somebody is promoting this, you know, strategy that they can do X, Y, and Z. And I often have to step back and hold them back and remind them. I say, yeah, that may work in certain situations, but for your business, that's probably not the best strategy to follow. Because what you're trying to build does not lend itself to some of these other types of strategies that even we talk about at Anderson. And so residential assisted living is a unique aspect of real estate investing. A little bit about Anderson and the partners who helped form it. I'm one of the partners, of course, in Anderson. There's also Toby Mathis. He and I formed Anderson back in '99. And we also have Michael Bowman, another one of our partners. And what really makes us unique, I would say, in this space is that not only are we attorneys and we have a law firm and we have over 300 employees spread out over 4 different states, but we're also real estate investors. So many of the strategies that we use for our own investing are the same strategies that we help our clients to facilitate their tax planning, their asset protection strategies, because I found success with my own investing. Toby and I collectively have over 300 doors, about 150 some properties right now. And it's something that we're actively engaged in. So when it comes to structuring your investments, we speak from a position of knowledge and actually doing stuff, not just book smarts, what you read about how to set stuff up. No, we're actually in the trenches with you. We're doing the same things you are. We operate in different asset classes that we've invested into. And there's different strategies that come to play. And so that's really our forte here at Anderson. It's one of the reasons why Gene first reached out to us. I remember meeting with him, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 years ago in Las Vegas. And we sat down. I was teaching an event, a 3-day event there in Las Vegas. And at lunchtime, he came in and we went into a side room and he showed me what he was talking about when it came to planning. He said, I've talked to some people and a lot of our clients are doing this and that. And he said, what do you think, Clint? And so we sat down and I said, Gene, based upon what your people are doing and what you've explained to me, I think there's some ways we could tweak the structure. And I said, you could do this, you could do that. And if you move it this way, here are the benefits they're going to get. And that really intrigued him. He said, no one's ever really talked about it in those terms before. And what he did is he asked us to come in and start working with his students to help them build their business. Because it's one thing to get the education that Gene does a fabulous job on teaching people how to start this off, how to find a different way of making money from real estate rather than the traditional way of just being a landlord. But then there's that business aspect of it. And that is where Anderson fits in how we tie in together with Gene. In where we work together is that we show his students, and we've been working with his students now for, like I said, 8 years, I think it's been going on, and structuring them to build their business going forward. So a little bit about Anderson. If you're not familiar with us, as I stated, Toby and I started the firm in '99. And today we have offices in Washington State. We have offices in Nevada, Wyoming, and Utah. If we can go to the next slide, please. And it's just something that we have kept building over time. And we have 17, 18,000 clients spread out across the United States. And we work with them to help grow their business. If we can go to the next one, please. But one of the things that I've learned as an investor and as a business owner is that there's certain things that we have to look at when we're going to talk about structuring. One is you want to focus on asset protection. That's very important. And I saw a lot of people when I first started investing that would go through this strategy, which they would focus on the asset protection side, the entity formation, and we'd want to get that down. But there's also tax and bookkeeping, which is another service that we offer. This is really important to make sure that you're accounting for your income the right way and you're keeping good books and records. Now, why would that be important? Because if you want to grow your business, you're going to need to have good books and records to back up whatever it is you're doing. If you want to get an SBA loan, what are they going to ask for? They want to see your books and records, your profit and loss, your balance sheet. I mean, look what's gone on with the pandemic. Last year, with the PPP and the EIDL loans that they came out with, and they made this opportunity available to small business owners. We helped several thousand businesses obtain money under the PPP or under the EIDL. But there were certain people we couldn't help. And the reason we couldn't help them is because they hadn't set up their books the right way. They couldn't properly account for their income in the way in which the government wanted to see it. The SBA needed to see it in order to give them the funds that they were requesting. And this is no joke. I had some people, I told them, I need a balance sheet for last year or profit and loss. And they say, yeah, hold on a minute. And they go, hey, check your email. And I look at my email and they'd send a napkin and they would put numbers on the napkin. And they say, use this, submit this to back up our numbers. Okay, you can probably guess what happened. We couldn't obtain funding for them and they were disgruntled. And I said, hey, it's, you put yourself in this position because you didn't understand the importance of the tax and bookkeeping. But at the same time, we don't want to get so over hyper focused on the tax side where all you're focused on is minimizing your income that can also impair your ability to move forwards. I mean, I was in that position at one point in my career when I first started running Anderson and building this business up, where I didn't pay taxes for 4 years. And I thought I was so smart with the strategies that Toby and I were employing to make $500,000 a year and pay zero federal income tax, only to find out that type of planning, although it saved us on taxes, it prevented us from growing our business because people that we were working with, underwriters, lenders to help expand, to get capital, wouldn't touch us because of that. And so you have to be sensitive to that. And then you want to focus on retirement, what you're doing, building all this up, taking advantage of the tax code to reduce your taxable income the right way, to put money aside so you can invest in a tax-free environment. That's part of what we do as well at Anderson. And then the last part was which encompasses all this is about the business strategy aspect, which I'm going to be sharing with you. We're going to be going through and drawing out diagrams of how you should structure your business, how you bring capital in. I will show all this to you on a whiteboard. And what that really is the business planning side of this. It's not just about creating an entity. It's about understanding how entities work together. Because I truly believe that when you have the right entities in place, they can help you do more. When you've made the right tax elections for those entities, it can help you do more. It can help grow your business faster. It's something that I realized later in my career, my business career. It wasn't until 2011, 2012 that I realized this. And so the traits of a great plan are asset protection, tax planning, and business planning. And if done properly, they'll work for you. If you just give me a minute here, what I want to show you now is a testimonial. Some of you may recognize this individual. He's a client. I met him a number of years ago. He's been through Gene's courses. He's one of his star students, and he's really taken his RAL business to a whole nother level now. And it started with getting that basic information, the opening the doors to the opportunities that are available there. So with that, if we can go to the testimonial video here, just so people can hear from Rocky what his experience has been like in working with Anderson. He's been a personal client of mine, as I stated, for many, many years. And now we have no sound.
Making sure some of our members' identities are protected. We wanted to make sure all of our assets were protected, making sure the LLCs were set up for the homes, making sure some of our members' identities are protected so it's not out there, and then making sure our company was set up right to be doing assisted living. So, and what our goals were to do with assisted living, and to make sure everything was set up to where it was well protected, and to make sure we followed all the laws of doing, you know, with our corporation, minutes, notes, everything like that, which Anderson just kind of helps us, takes care of for us, and finds us and works with us on that. So.
Yeah, so with his business, as I said, he's expanded it. And through working with him, we've helped him grow it by having all the necessary structures in place so he could qualify for certain lending opportunities to go out there and buy the properties he needed to. So we're first going to start, I'm going to throw some scare tactics at you, build some fear. And the reason I'm going to do this is because I want you to understand that asset protection is important. There's a lot of lawsuits that are filed on an annual basis, you know, over 84 million. And when it comes to structuring this type of business, there's a lot of liability there. And if you don't appreciate the risk, then you may not do it the right way. Sometimes people say, well, Clint, you just peddle fear. Yeah, absolutely I do for a little bit in all my events. And the reason why I peddle the fear is because if you don't understand where the risk is, then you're not going to respect it. And you're not going to take the necessary steps to ensure that you've not put yourself in harm's way. Because I don't know how many of you have been involved in a lawsuit before, but it only takes one to wake up many people. And the problem is in those situations, if it's that devastating tsunami of a lawsuit, it can wipe out all of your hard efforts, all of the work that you've put into building the business, and you have to start over. And nobody wants to start over from scratch. I've heard people say before it's easier the second time around. Well, I often think to myself, that's BS. The people that say that, they never did it the first time around because there's so much blood and sweat and work and sleepless nights and away from your family that goes into building a business that once you get to that point where it's successful, you no longer have the energy to do that again. You don't want to go through that process again. And so you want to make sure that you're taking all the necessary steps to ensure that one simple mistake, the most innocent of mistakes, and many times it's not even things that you do, will not take it down. So what are some of those threats? Well, what's in the news right now? COVID, right? Environmental concerns, toxic mold. You set up a house and you have residents in there and they contract this. Who's going to be liable? Well, right now there are hundreds of thousands of lawsuits that have been filed against adult care facilities as a result of people who have passed away. I personally know of an individual in the community in which I live whose mom passed away because one of the care providers had COVID, transmitted to this individual. And so, you know, they're in this situation and they're contemplating bringing a lawsuit because proper care measures were not utilized the way they indicated. And they didn't get to see their mom, didn't get to say goodbye to her mother during this time. So that just compounds the grief and the emotional loss. But at the same time, I can also see it from the business owner's perspective because you're forced into a situation where you have to provide the care to these individuals, all right? Otherwise, you can be sued. You couldn't just neglect them and just leave them there in the property. And so how do you come up with a safe way of doing it You know, the government mandates that you have to do all these certain types of tests, you know, take their temperature. You remember what it was like going through this. But none of that at the end of the day really will ever guarantee that the person is not going to transmit it to someone, because that's impossible. You can take someone's test right now, they can come back negative, and they can be positive 2 hours from now when they start showing symptoms, but they're still transmitting. And they're there to help individuals. But unfortunately, unless Congress does something to pass a law to stop these types of lawsuits, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to lose things. So that's one of the issues. One of the other problems you have with that is neglect. So you hire people to take care of your residents, and those people that you hire, maybe they neglect the care. There's a situation I read about where an individual wandered off and they were gone for about 45 minutes before the facility staff discovered they were gone. Well, while this person was wandering around, they fell and broke her wrist, and she broke some bones in her face. And what they found out later when she died is that she had bleeding on the brain. And so they actually sued the facility and they got a judgment against it for $5 million. And so that can happen. I mean, they said it was neglect, and you can't be everywhere at all times, but maybe it was a neglectful employee. And the fact that they work for you makes you responsible. You also have, of course, the issues with slips and falls, right? So slip and fall planning has to be part of your business to make sure that you're doing things to ensure that it's a safe environment. So elderly people, disabled residents, you know, will not slip and fall and injure themselves. I remember reading about a case where an individual resident slipped and fell, they broke their leg and neck, and then they ended up passing away from that. And that was like $4.8 million they received. And so there's lots of concerns that come from running an RAL business you have to be sensitive to. You've got the falls, you've got inconsistent or incomplete erroneous documentation, so your staff isn't doing the right documentation. You have abuse that can take place. You've seen all this, many of these things in the news before. Understaffing, right? Or inadequate staffing, that can raise or give cause for a lawsuit. Failure to transfer a discharge. Maybe they need to go to a higher level facility of care. They need that, but they don't get transferred in time and something happens. You can be sued for that. Failure to supervise. Policies and procedures that you that are put in place, maybe by the state, that you're not following. Wrongful death, wound issues. I mean, these are all causes or that lead to lawsuits, all right? There are ways in which attorneys can come after you. So what we want to do is make sure that we're isolating ourselves, because what is the cost here by not paying attention to these things? You know, here's an example. A nursing home resident died after suffering serious malnutrition. Okay, that was a $7 million judgment against that home. There was $11 million judgment entered against a 36-year-old man with traumatic brain injury, died after ingesting foreign objects in a Phoenix assisted living care facility. And then here's one for $45 million where a disabled woman drowned in a bathtub. So you can see how these cases can ratchet up and the damages can be quite costly. So the question comes down to, you know, what is your plan? How are you going to put all of your business together to ensure that if something like this were to occur, that you're not going to lose it all, because you've made a serious investment to be where you are right now. And when I say investment, I mean in the education component, that's a big one, but also in your time, right? Maybe you've actually left your job because you want to move forwards with this. And you don't want that one lawsuit to come along and put you back at ground zero. In fact, under ground zero is where you may be, because a judgment entered against you would follow you around for years to come, 10, 20 years, and you'll always have that hanging over you, and it'll prevent you from going out there and creating new businesses, because anyone who pulls up your credit is going to see that, and you no longer become you will no longer have the ability to borrow, and it can really traumatically impact your future ability to grow your businesses. So what we want to do is set up our structures where we use anonymity in some aspects of it, so people don't know what we have. We want to make sure that you're protected from your investments in your business, and we want to make sure your business, all right, is protected from the investment. So it's a combination approach is what we're going to embark upon now in creating our structure. And if I can get you to send back over to me the whiteboard, I can share out on my iPad, then I can start my doodling. And I guarantee to impress you with my drawings. So if we just make me the presenter, go to whiteboard, share. Okay, you should be able to see that right now. All right, so here's what we want to look at. When it comes to your assisted living, residential assisted living, we understand that we need to break it out. You have the business side of what you're doing, so you have the business side. And then if you own the real estate, you have the real estate side over here. And then possibly you have what I like to say is the investment side. All right, so there's really three components that I look at. Now the investment side would be, okay, the cash that you're going to put into the business to get it off the ground, to get it funded. The real estate side, of course, is going to be the property. You may own it or you may be leasing the property. We'll talk about that. And then the business side of this is where the residents are going to reside. It's whom they're going to be contracting with for the care, for the facility, where they're going to be staying. So there's three separate components when you're looking at structuring a residential assisted living business and working with someone. And what we want to do is isolate these out. So first I'm going to focus on the business side and explain to you how I would go about creating this and what type of entity we're going to be using. So at the business side, the first thing you want to know is where you're going to be creating your business. All right, am I going to be running it in Arizona? Is it going to be in Florida? Will it be in California? You need to determine where you plan to offer these services, because that's going to determine where you're going to set up the business itself. Now, I know there's a lot of talk. If you've seen some of my videos on YouTube or you've been to one of my full day events, you know, we talk about Wyoming, we talk about Delaware and the benefits that come from setting up an entity in those states. And they're right for certain situations, but they're not correct for all situations. When it comes to this type of planning, we typically will set up an entity in the state where the service is going to be provided. So for example, if I was going to provide the service in Arizona, then I would create an entity in Arizona for my business side of the residential assisted living. Now, what type of entity could we set up? You could either set up a limited liability company or it could be a corporation. Either one. Now an LLC, if you're not familiar with it, it's different than a corp. An LLC has members and managers. It's run typically by a manager, or it's owned by its members. A corporation has shareholders, directors, and officers that are involved in it. Now, why is this important? Well, if you contemplate setting up this business and it's going to take an investment on your part, I'd say $50,000, $60,000, $100,000. If you're looking at that type of investment to get this off the ground because you really want to take this business places, then on a large investment, I would start with a corporation and not an LLC. I would set it up as a corp. Now I'll talk about S versus C here in a moment, but I would set it with a corporation. And here's why I would start with a corp. Because with a corporation, we can apply for what's called 1244 stock loss. And what this means is that when we set up your business, we set it up in a very specific way that you make a certain election under the Internal Revenue Code, this 1244. And this has to be done at the outset, so that any contributions you make to start your business running, the money you put into it to get it going, if something were to go wrong, let's assume that you're a year and a half into this and that devastating lawsuit hits and you have to shut your business down and close it down and bankrupt it out. Well, the money that you invested into your business, you could write off up to $50,000 on your individual 1040. I mean, think on it. If I put in $80,000 to get this business going, 80K over between me and my wife to get this business set up, and we took back the stock, then we would be able to write off the $80,000 on our 1040, and we could carry that forwards. So it means that if we had income from other sources, let's assume that my wife Tracy is running the RAL, and I'm still working as an attorney. And as the attorney, I bring in $250,000 this year. Then I could take that $80,000 loss against my $250,000 in earnings and reduce my taxable income. Now, if you had a limited liability company set up, you wouldn't be able to do this. You would not be able to write off that loss. In fact, what would happen is you could take $3,000 and you would carry the rest forward. So when it comes to structuring this, and I'm trying to determine which is the best strategy to set up my business, which form, this is really important here. Choose the form based upon the investment you're going to be making. So if I'm going to be making a sizable investment, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, if that's where I'm going with this, then I would suggest you look at using a traditional corporation rather than an LLC. So you have this back-end escape valve. If something goes wrong with that business, if a lawsuit hits and you need to shut it down, this at least gets you an immediate tax deduction. To do what? Well, to pay your attorney's fees, maybe. I don't know, nothing wrong with that. But it's really important to do this. In fact, we had a client that had shut down a business similar to what I'm talking about right here, and they had made an $80,000 investment in it, and their CPA didn't understand about how 1244 worked. We'd put this provision in their documents, and when the CPA shut it down, he told the client they could only write off $3,000 a year. Well, the client called us up and actually spoke to my partner, Toby. Some of you may have been on his Tax Tuesday events. You know, he's a tax genius. Toby spoke to him and he said, listen, no, you can actually take that full $80,000 on your tax return, end up saving them about $35,000 in taxes with that ability. So it's the simple, I mean, there's simple things like this. Words do matter. The type of entity you choose actually will have an impact on your business going forwards. So if you're going to make a sizable investment, I go with a corp. If you're not going to be funding it personally, maybe you're going to be borrowing, and so that's where most of the debt is coming in, you can go with the LLC as the setup. Now, why would I choose an LLC over corporation? With a limited liability company, you have two options that would not be available in a corporate setting for a traditional corp. Number one, with the LLC, you don't have all the same formalities as a corporation. See, a corporation, you have to have annual meetings, they're a requirement, shareholders meeting, directors meetings. You do not have those same requirements with an LLC. Now, we would suggest that you still utilize those techniques in running the business, but if you forgot, there's no penalty for it. Whereas with a corporation, if you're not on top of it, and that's why we have a service where we make sure our clients are always notified of what needs to be done so they don't fall behind the 8 ball. We have what's called a corporate assistance program, where we send out notifications, you need to do this, this, and this to maintain your corporate veil, because if you're involved in a lawsuit, that could come back to bite you. And they could then pierce your veil and sue you individually, and you lose the protection of the corporation. So with an LLC, you don't have those same requirements. The second benefit of the LLC is that we can set up a structure where your residential assisted living business has anonymity, meaning that if I set it up in Arizona, people, that is outside parties, would not know that I've created this structure. I can set it up in a way in which I would first create a Wyoming LLC over here, and it would then own my Arizona LLC. And by structuring it in this manner, anybody who looks at my business would see the Wyoming LLC as its sole owner, and that Wyoming LLC doesn't disclose anything. So if you want anonymity and complete privacy with your RAL business, and this is another way to structure it. Now, at the same time, although we can do this and set it up with anonymity, and a lot of people like it, keep in mind that when you're out there and you're running this active business, anonymity, can also hurt you, because you need to get trade lines set up for your business. You need to establish maybe a merchant account. Of course, you're going to need to establish a bank account. Maybe you're going to be working with lenders. And so those parties with whom you're trying to transact business with to help grow your business, many times what they'll do in making a determination of how they're going to work with you is pull up information on your company. And if they went to look at your company that was set up in Arizona, and they see on here, it's Evergreen Living, assisted living, and they look up Evergreen Assisted Living LLC. They're expecting to see your name as a member or as a manager, and instead they see a Wyoming LLC down there. And if they look that LLC up in Wyoming and they don't see your information associated with it, they may have some hesitation because they may wonder, well, how do we know you're the actual person who's involved in this business? Because we want to work with you, but we don't know for sure. We can't prove this is your business. So anonymity on the operating arm, and that's really what the business is. It's the operating arm of what you're doing. That can sometimes hurt you. And so that's something you have to balance with your own planning. Maybe you have some compelling reasons why you want to create the anonymity around that. And I understand that. We can do that, but it's going to take more of a two-tier structure. So in creating the RAL side, the business itself, you have two options. It's either going to be a limited liability company or it's going to be a traditional corporation, right? And then the entity should typically be established in the state, right? State where business is taking place. So that's key. You're going to set it up in the state where the business is taking place. You can't run it out of Wyoming. You can't run it out of Delaware if you have a California residential assisted living facility. You're going to have to be filed in that state. And so setting it up in Delaware isn't going to help you. Now, once I get this set up and I have this here, the number one mistake that I see many people make is they want to turn around and they're going to buy a piece of real estate, or maybe they already have a piece of real estate that they're going to use in their investing. So I'm going to have to erase all this slide, all the work on here. So let me do that. Erase all the drawings. So now I've got my business here. Here's my business. Let's assume that I went with a corp. Oh, by the way, I didn't talk about this, tax status of it, tax status. This applies to the LLC or the corporation. So for the tax status on this, what should you choose? You have a couple different ways you could set it up. If it was an LLC, you could have it set up as a partnership. You could have it set up as a C Corp. You could have it set up as an S Corp, or possibly a disregarded entity, sole proprietor. Now, here's what you don't want. Sole proprietor, sole prop, no. Partnership, okay? No, you don't want that either. Those are treated one and the same. That is the worst tax situation you can put yourself in. So that leaves us the option of either going with an S Corp or a C Corp for our business. Now, I personally like to go with C corporations over S corporations. Why is that? Because an S corporation is a pass-through. What it means is that if I generate $100,000 in income, that will pass through to my personal tax return, right? It comes through via a K-1 statement that gets passed down to me. Now that means I have to pay taxes at what my personal tax rate is. So if my personal tax rate is 37%, then I'm going to be taxed at 37% on that $100,000, which means I'm going to pay $37,000 in taxes on that. Whereas with a C corporation, it's taxed in its own rate. So with the C Corp, you're going to be taxed at a lower 21% tax rate. So that's going to be more beneficial to you overall to use the C Corporation's lower tax rate. I mean, there in that example, I saved you 16% in taxes. So from a profitability standpoint, you'll have more after-tax earnings with a C Corporation to reinvest into your business than you would with an S Corporation. Now, that's one benefit of it. The second reason why I like C corporations is because if you're working in your business, right? This is your business here and you're doing things, you're going to pay yourself with a salary. You're going to take a salary out of your business. Now, a salary is deductible to your company. So if it's an LLC taxed as a C Corp, even if it was taxed as an S Corp, it's a deduction to the business. So if my company earns $100,000 and I take a salary of 100K, then my corporation has zero profit for the year. Now, why do I like this over the S corporation? Well, this is going to go more to that business planning component that I talked about earlier, about how to set this up. You see, what I've learned over 20 years is that when you have pass-through entities and you're working with lenders and you're trying to grow and borrow capital, pass-through entities can make it more challenging to get a loan. Because what occurs with pass-through entities is that an underwriter, let's assume you're going to buy a new property. You want to bring on a new property and you want to run it through your business. Well, you need to get a loan for $700,000. And so you're applying for a loan. And if you had an S corporation set up, the S corporation provides you this K1 that shows up on your 1040 tax return, which represents your portion of the income associated with this business. And that K1 states that you own 100% of an LLC or a corporation. Well, the underwriter that you're working with to obtain a loan to go out and buy this new property that you want to use in your RAL business, they're not going to base their underwriting decision, their lending decision solely on the income that you show on your 1040. They're actually now going to look at your business because your tax return has informed the underwriter, because they're going to see it, that you are an owner in a business. And so then what they're going to want to know is, hey, I need to see the profit and loss. I need to see the balance sheet. I need to see the tax returns for your RAL business. And you may think, well, that's not a big deal. Just turn all that stuff over. Let me tell you, it is a big deal. Because one of the things that we utilize businesses for is to benefit ourselves, right, to the greatest extent as possible, to find ways to pull money out on a tax-free basis so we don't have to pay taxes on it. That's the best part about being in business for yourself, that it opens up additional opportunities for tax savings, to not have to pay as much in taxes because now you're in control of your receipt of income. So you utilize strategies inside of your business to reduce your income. Or maybe you're at a point where your business just really isn't that profitable yet because you're in the first formative years and it's break even, or maybe you lose a little money. What does that mean to you? Well, if an underwriter sees that your business is break even, is losing money, maybe it's intentionally set up that way, you wanted to show some losses, then they're going to be concerned about your ability to repay the loan to buy that other piece of property, even though you have great income from other sources that could support the loan itself. Having a pass-through entity could jeopardize that. Now, these things that I've learned, I've been in that situation where my tax returns prevented me from obtaining financing to close on deals because what they saw in the business tax return didn't make them feel comfortable. They didn't understand what they were looking at. Or they challenged me on year-over-year income, or we had a dip in 2010 of 5%. Our income went down by 5% in 2010, and the bank then 2 weeks before closing told me they wouldn't do the deal, would not underwrite the deal, after giving me multiple assurances that they would allow me to close in this commercial building. So it's things like that that can hurt you when you have a pass-through. When you have a C corporation, lenders don't know you're in business for yourself because nothing passes through to your 1040 to alert someone that, hey, this guy has a corporation set up. He's in business for himself. We need to go check out that business to see what type of liabilities and exposure it has that will prevent his ability to repay the loan. I think that is really important. And many CPAs don't see it from this side. What they'll often tell people is, oh, you've got double taxation. Listen, that double taxation stuff is garbage. It doesn't affect anyone that I've ever worked with because of the way we account for the income. We're able to pull it out. And even if you take it out as a dividend, if you're in a 37% tax bracket, you'll take it out and you'll be in a lower tax bracket, even with what they call double taxation. But we can work around that issue. To me, it's about growing your business. And by having a C corporation there, you're not disclosing the information. You're keeping that information private. So people who view your tax returns don't know about your RAL business. And vice versa, they'll look at the RAL business that has its own separate tax return. So that could help with SBA funding and other types of loans you would get just for that side. So that's one thing that I want you to keep in mind, that when you're setting this up, there's really only two ways you're going to go. You're either going to go S Corp or C Corp. My preference is always going to be C Corporation tax status. I have complete control of the income. If I want it to show up on my 1040, I'm going to pay myself a salary. If I don't want the money, I'm going to leave it in the business for future investment. Okay, so that's our business side right here. We've got it set up. Maybe it's set up as a C corporation. And now we've come up with a name. So when you're choosing your business, make sure that you're checking it to see if that name is available. And what I mean by the name is available, it's not only with the Secretary of State. You also want to make sure if you're going to get a web domain set up. So a lot of times what people do is they'll come up with a name, and they'll say, oh, that name's available at the Secretary of State level. I can go out there and get that name. But then they want to get an internet domain with the same name. And they find out that somebody is already using that name. So that kind of throws a wrench into the works here, and it screws it up. So the first thing I would search for is to see if a domain name is available for your new RAL business. Check on that. Once you know that domain name is available, so in my example, let's say it was 3 Palms Assisted Living. Well, if I can get that domain name, then I'll go check with the Secretary of State and see if I can get 3 Palms Assisted Living set up. And if that's available, boom, I'm going to secure the domain name and tell Anderson to file for 3 Palms Assisted Living. So now I know I have both set up for me. So rather than doing it the opposite way. All right, so you got your corporation set up, you get your domain name set up, it gets filed with the state. You're going to be an officer of this company. You're going to get a bank account set up for it. And so you're going to go through all the processes now that you need to start your advertising. But the question is, where are these people going to reside? Where are the residents going to reside? Now, there's 2 methods here. One, let me erase the screen. One method is to lease property, right? So you don't own it yourself. You're going to go out and lease it from a third party. So here's this person over here. She has this property. You want to use it in your RAL. You're over here. So you're going to enter into a lease agreement, all right, for that property. Now, you enter into the lease agreement with your corporation to lease that property. Now, you don't have to structure that property at all because you don't own it, right? It's someone else who owns the property. So you can just directly lease it from your corporation. Now, another consideration you may have here when you're entering into leases, remember, if my corporation is leasing the property, who's liable on that agreement, that lease agreement? Your corporation's going to be liable. So if for some reason you run into getting that business off the ground, you've leased the property, and maybe you're struggling at first to fill it because people are concerned about going into this type of environment at this point in time because of COVID, and you cannot then fulfill on the lease obligation, but you have your business set up. Well, the landlord can always sue and get a judgment against your company. Now, that's just going to put your business back. So if you're investing in growing your business, one of the things I often tell people is that your asset is more than just the cash you put into it. It's going to be the investment into the marketing, the name, the goodwill that you're starting to build up over time. So if you can minimize the amount of liability you're bringing into your business by using a blocker entity, a solution in this scenario when you're leasing property might look something like this. You create an LLC that leases the property, right? Your corporation doesn't lease it, your LLC leases the property. And so now the landlord can sue the limited liability company for failure to pay. And then your LLC subleases it to your corporation. So you have a sublease here. Now, by doing the sublease scenario, you're keeping your corporation, your RAL business, protected from a disgruntled landlord. So if you fell into a situation where you're having a hard time initially getting it off the ground, you got the property secured under the lease, but you can't necessarily make the payments because you're struggling with getting the residents, well, that sublease arrangement may be your saving grace to keep your business intact to prevent someone from getting a judgment against your business by using that blocker entity. So this is a little twist on it. A lot of people can go directly to the corp. You can still do this, but I wouldn't discount the benefit of using a blocker entity in a leasing arrangement where you're going to be leasing properties. All right, now let's go to the one where you actually own the properties that you're going to be using in your business. So What you never want to do is set up your RAL business here and put a property directly into the business. That is the worst strategy for this type of structure. I mean, we spent maybe 5 minutes just talking about the potential for liability. We could have spent 2 hours going through that, and I could have given you case after case and verdict after verdict where people have been sued and their businesses are taken down. But we don't need to do that because I think you already appreciate the potential for risk. And so our job then is to minimize that risk, to ensure that if something happens with our business, we don't lose our assets. And business owners who do not understand this concept are often prone to put themselves in harm's way. And if their business fails because of a lawsuit, they lose their ability to continue to conduct business because all of their assets are taken away. And what is the main asset you're going to have in a residential assisted living? You're going to have that property where residents are going to live and receive care. And so you would never want to put that property in that business because that business is a liability generator. You hire people, they're providing care to people. That is creating liability for your business. So if somebody's hurt, they sue the RAL business. I don't want to have a business with $600,000-$700,000 in assets inside of it because the creditors could take that. So for my real estate, it's never going to be held inside of here. The real estate will be held in a separate LLC over here. We're going to put the property over here. Now, many times the way we like to structure the property is first start with a Wyoming entity, Wyoming LLC. And we do this for anonymity. Okay, so we're going to set it up for anonymity so that no one knows you have this. I don't want people to know, hey, not only do I have the business, I also have all this property over here as well, because that just emboldens attorneys. If they think you have a lot of assets, right, you're the catnip. You're the one that's going to get them that present for their spouse on Valentine's Day or Christmas. Hey, honey, here's a new car. We sued an RAL and we got this great judgment against him. This guy had a lot of assets. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy that they think, well, he's really not worth going after because we could get a judgment, but at the end of the day, we couldn't collect. So just take the policy limits and go away. That's what this type of planning can do for you. Discourage aggressive creditors. So by setting it up with the Wyoming LLC, this was in Wyoming and this was a Arizona LLC that owned the property. We have this structure in place where if anybody looks at this LLC, your name's not associated with it. The LLC points to the Wyoming company, which you own. But that Wyoming LLC does not provide any information to third parties because Wyoming doesn't collect any information on the owners of limited liability companies. So the way we create our structures is we build this anonymity shield around the real estate that's used in an RAL business. So clients, some of our clients can have, 3 properties all set up this way in different LLCs. This is another Arizona LLC, and here's a third Arizona LLC. Now, you need to put them to use in your properties. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to lease the properties to the business. So now we're just going to lease them. Lease these properties to our active business that we own. Now, if you're participating in that business, there's something here called the self-rental rule that can actually provide even more benefits. You can group these together from a tax standpoint, and here's what's really neat. You can get some tax benefits here with this type of structure as well, that as you depreciate these properties, you can take the depreciation and use it to offset your income over here inside of your business. It's a certain election that we make in limited circumstances like we have here, so that the depreciation now can be used to offset the income that's coming in from the facility. Now, you don't have to do that. We could choose not to go that route. Maybe you have other real estate on the side. We could use your income in other ways, but it gives us an option. And so I like this type of strategy because it also has some tax planning built into it to help keep the income low inside of the RAL business itself. So this would be a lease arrangement. Now, by entering into a lease arrangement, what you're doing is that if anything goes wrong in this business, all of your property is protected. Your property isn't owned by the business. So if the business gets sued, you don't lose your assets that you need to use to run your business. So they could take my business down. Maybe it's one of those COVID type cases that it was outside of your control, right? It's an act of God. You couldn't prevent this. So they take the business down. You just create another RAL and you have the property so you can go back into business in this manner as well. So by having the structure in place in this particular manner, you're able to keep growing. Now, if you want to open up multiple locations through your business, keep in mind, you could always do it through this one company here, or another option you have, just to throw another, to make it a little more, I don't know, complex, because I want to give you as much information as I can to think about. I have some clients that have multiple locations, so you can set up separate business units that are all owned by this one RAL here, and these separate business units could contract with these LLCs. Maybe it's in different states that you're doing this activity. So now we're ensuring that all the income flows into the main parent, all the profits, but we have separate business units for liability purposes, or maybe we're looking to consolidate an employee leasing arrangement. I mean, the thing about RAL that I really like is that it poses different types of challenges for us, and there's different ways to put these things together. And it's not just, you know, this go up, set up one structure here, and you're done. No, if you think about it, depending on where your business is going to go into the future, where you're starting out, there's different ways to approach it. And so the planning is what makes it so intriguing for us here at Anderson, where we're putting these things together for the clients, because the outcome, as Rocky was talking about, if done right, you can see the success that comes from that by having the right structures in place. Now, the last thing I mentioned was the investment side. So the investment side means cash. If you have a lot of cash that you're going to be using to get the business going, I would set up a different Wyoming LLC for my cash. And I would put my cash inside of this company. And then you have the option then for your RAL over here. If you want to give yourself additional protection, you could either contribute all the funds directly, or you could make it a combination of loans and contributions. So your LLC could actually loan money to your business. Now, why would you want to loan money? Because when you loan money, you take back you file what's called a UCC1, which is a financing statement which protects the assets of the business, the goodwill, the cash on hand. So if anything does happen, you become your own creditor. You step in line in front of any other litigant out there. So if they try to liquidate your business, you're the first one to get paid back because you have this loan in place. The other reason why I want to keep the cash there in that LLC is that if something were to happen, and let's say the liability escapes the RAL, maybe you're in charge of it, you're the manager of your RAL, you're the president, and you're actively involved, and they sue you personally, and they say, well, you were negligent in your hiring, and you should have known that this person had some blemishes on their background. And you said, well, I used a background service, and they missed it. And they do this all the time. We actually have a pending lawsuit against a company that we hired to do a background search on an ex-employee, and they missed several things in the background search. And it cost us a lot of money in litigation against this individual that we eventually put in jail. But it's things like that that you want to make sure that you're protected against. So by having your cash over here, if somebody sued you personally when they're suing your business and they get a judgment against you, well, you don't want your cash to be exposed to that lawsuit. So by putting the cash in a separate entity, your investable cash, you're going to protect it. So if we can go back to the slide presentation now. And then I got a few more slides here I just want to go through with you. So the thing about all of this to keep in mind is that if we go to the next one, this is my favorite one. I tell you what, if you can spot Gene on that dock, I'm going to give the first person that spots him a free corporation. Yeah, so it's not a one-size-fits-all approach here when it comes to planning with RALs and with investment real estate. All right, a lot of people adopt that approach. They say, oh, just set up an LLC, set it up as an S Corp. You probably heard this a lot. A lot of CPAs will tell you this. But I hope I've shown you that there are other considerations outside of just tax or outside of just asset protection you want to look at, that you also want to look at the business planning aspect of it. And so what I want to provide each and every one of you, should you want to take advantage of this, is a free strategy session. So we have individuals at Anderson, strategists that work on RAL businesses throughout the year, help people get these established. And what we want to do is provide you this opportunity to obtain this strategy session. It's free because you're part of the RAL community, because you work with Gene. We provide these for his students. And what we're going to do is we're going to analyze your business. We're going to analyze your structure. So if you have existing entities in place, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to perform a risk assessment to figure out where your liability is. And then we're going to discuss strategies that you should be implementing for the type of business you plan to grow or develop. And then we're going to put together a plan for you and tell you, all right, this is where you're going to need to set up your structure. This is how the entity is going to be filed in this state. Here's how it should be taxed. And here's the benefits of doing it this way. So then it can all come together for you so that you have a roadmap to go forwards. And if you want to use us to help you do it, we can be there for you to help get it implemented. But you first need to start with a plan. It's not as simple as just going out and setting up an entity. Many times people that go out and set up entities, we have to start over. And I hate to have to tell someone, hey, you know, that entity you set up, well, it really doesn't work for what it is, for what you want to do. I know it sounded great at the time. The other thing to consider as well in getting this plan set up in place is you want to lock in certain deductions that are available to you as someone who's going through this training. If you're investing into yourself and you're working with Gene to go forwards to create your business, well, there's certain tax deadlines we have that you need to be aware of, that there's structures that you can put in place to ensure that the investment you're making in yourself through Gene to build your business is fully deductible to you. And a lot of people unfortunately miss this because they don't know about it and they don't set up the proper plan in place ahead of time to ensure they're not missing those deadlines. So that in and of itself should compel you to take advantage of this. So if you want to get up a strategy session, we make it really simple for you to set this up. All you need to do, if we go to the next slide, is go to this link that's going to be up here in just a moment. aba.link/RLNA1. RLNA1. If you go right to that link, type that in, it's going to bring you to a website. You're going to put in your information and you put in that info. And then what it's going to do is set up you get some emails so you can schedule your strategy session. What I'm also going to do is provide you a copy of my book, Asset Protection for Real Estate Investors. So you'll have a guideline of different types of entities. It's actually a great resource, I mean, for corporations, LLCs, land trusts, and it'll explain to you how all this stuff really fits together as well from an investment standpoint. So I hope you take advantage of it. If you go to RALNA1, then sign up right then and there, and then get your strategy sessions set up. And from there, we'll actually send you some invites. You can get invited to our more expansive classes as well, one-day courses we teach on the asset protection and tax planning that deal with real estate and building your business. So with that, I want to thank you all for joining me for this hour of information on residential assisted living and the proper business structures. So with that, let me see, were there any? No, we didn't show any questions there. Wish you all the best, everyone, and I look forward to seeing you at one of these upcoming live events that we're going to be having here shortly. All right, take care.
Hey, Clint. Hey,
Yeah.
Clint, we have quite a few questions here. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
I was having trouble coming back. I was like, I can't get back. And I have a dog barking in the background. It's always, there's quiet the whole time until you get to this point. So, all right.
Oh, there's some questions. I definitely, I don't see them on my side.
Here, I can get it out for you. Here we go. It's got quite a few. So you guys, if I don't get to your question, or if it's kind of like a personal question or something like that, feel free to reach out to Clint. I will send you that same link that Clint just talked about a minute ago. So don't worry, you'll get that in an email. And then I will send you the recording with that. But if you guys have personal questions and I don't get to you, feel free to reach out to Clint directly and I'll send that out in an email too. Okay, So people, of course, have all these great compliments for you. Love this. Anderson's fabulous. Anderson Tuesdays are awesome. All great, right? Now we go. For asset protection, what kind of insurance policies do you suggest for RAL?
Well, I mean, you're going to want to get director, officer liability policies for sure. On top of that, we have a resource, an attorney, I think she's out of Colorado, that works on that side of the business that we could refer you out to discuss that and the license or any type of requirements that you would have to apply for from a business licensing standpoint. That I think would be a great resource. But you want to make sure for sure you have director and liability insurance, because if something goes wrong in the facility, you don't want to be hit personally.
All right. And everybody's talking about where they see Gene. So in the back, they can't see him, but he's in the back somewhere. Do you guys set up real estate LLCs as a C Corp too? So like if you're going to do the real estate as the LLC, would it be a C Corp as well?
No, with real estate, it really depends on what you're doing. If you're buy and hold, it wouldn't be a C corporation. It would be a pass through, could be a disregarded, could be a partnership. If you're flipping property, then I would use a C corporation. So again, it depends on the activity that you're engaging in.
Okay. And then if someone's already started an LLC, and then they want to change it to a corporation or at least re-elect the appropriate status, they can do that at any time, right?
Yeah, they can change the tax status at any time. So if you want to change it for 2021, you have until February 15th to make the election. I just made a 2553 election for someone who wanted to move from disregarded into S Corp status. We filed it today. So you have a limited window to make sure that it relates back to the first of the year and will carry all for 2021. So if you're considering it for this year, you need to do it right away.
And going back to your anonymity, whoa, can't say that. Anonymity. I felt like Finding Nemo there with the anemone statement. How do you find out if your state offers that kind of protection?
Well, there's about 15, 18 states that do not collect information on the members or managers of LLCs. And you could call us, you know, in strategy session, we would tell you. But the reason we typically use that Wyoming company is because that gives us that by default. We can structure any LLC in all 50 states, well, actually with the exception of Oregon, and obtain anonymity for our clients. So 49 states, not 50.
Perfect. And Arlene, I'm not sure. Can you give me that website one more time? Do you have that on your side? I was trying to pull up the slide really quick. ABA.
.link.
Yeah.
/RLNA1.
All right, guys, I just put that in the chat. Try and put that in your, someone was saying they thought they might have an issue with it. So we'll see if we can check on that real quick, you guys, and then see if that works for you. Now I have 2 people saying that link didn't work.
It didn't. Can you pull it up on your side that we can see it? A web browser?
Yep, let me see real quick.
Oh, wait, RALNA. You're right, I messed up. It's RALNA.
ABA.link. I'll put it in the chat.
RALNA. Yeah, I left an A out of there.
I thought you guys were just being short and fancy. There you go. Okay, now going back to questions. Okay, everyone's saying the RALNA one is the one that works. Perfect. All right. Thanks for the compliments, guys. I know he did a great job, huh? She says, I thought there were advantages to doing a partnership. So you kind of talked about there not being advantages to partnerships, but she's saying, is there less chance of an audit for having a partnership?
Yeah, so if you watch my other videos or seen my presentation where I talk about rental real estate and using partnerships, that's more on the passive side. So you have 2 different things here we're looking at. We have the residential assisted living, which is the active side, and then we have the real estate, which is the passive side. So the real estate holding entity, in my example, I had that Wyoming LLC set up there. That's on the passive side. And many times I'll elect to treat that as a partnership for federal tax purposes whenever I'm holding rental real estate, because it's going to kick me down a K1. And there are some advantages to having that K1 when it comes to obtaining financing. If you're using Freddie Fannie financing, or it's going to be underwritten with their guidelines, you get a bump on your income that you generate off your properties without any holdbacks for vacancies. 25% holdback, that no longer applies when you run it through a partnership. Also, it makes you look like a more experienced investor, because experienced investors, people who have portfolios, been investing for years, majority of them, they don't own properties in their own name, or they don't show up on their 1040 on Schedule E. They're showing up through K1s. So to me, it's about creating the image that I'm an experienced investor, because as you grow and you want to get into larger deals, you're going to move from purely an income-based loan to more of an asset-based, experience-based loan. And so the lender doesn't care so much about how much money you make or what your credit score is. What they're looking at is, do you know what you're doing when it comes to investing? They're going to look at your tax return. Your tax return is going to speak volumes for that. And they're going to look at the asset. So I want to get ahead of that and pre-package how all that's going to look in the future when I start moving into those categories.
Perfect. And so going back to anonymity, how will that work with the new Transparency Act?
All right. I've been getting a lot of questions. I just posted a video last week on my YouTube about that. So with the Corporate Transparency Act, you have to disclose either the main person that's operating the entity or any owner that has over 25% ownership in the corporation, LLC, trust, any entity that's filed, that's set up with the state, to the federal government, to FinCEN. And they're going to be releasing a form, and you have to report on an annual basis who the equity owners are, who exercises substantial control over the company. So this information is no different than when we apply for an EIN, meaning this: when I obtain an EIN, employer identification number, for an RAL business, I provide my client's information. So if I was setting it up for Gene, I would send in Gene's name to obtain the EIN with his social security number. So the federal government has this information, but it's not disseminated to the general public. You just can't call up the IRS and say, hey, I want to know what Gene is involved with, and here's the social, tell me every entity he has. No, that's not available. It's the same thing here. This is going to be kept private, and it's for the federal government. If they think that there's any money laundering or some type of crime taking place inside of an entity, then they can know who to go and look at. That's all the Corporate Transparency Act does.
Sounds like you've been answering that question often lately. He's got a great answer.
I have been. And you know what's interesting? I'm just going to throw this out there. I get a lot of comments. People pose to me, well, how about if I do this, and that way I don't have to disclose it, or if I set up a shell entity and I have 2 years. It's not worth it, right? Don't play games with this one, because the information is going to the federal government. They're going to get it one way or the other. And if you try to screw around, in my opinion, what can happen is that you can be subject to fines, possible jail time, because if they do come and look at it, they're going to ask you, why did you go to all this trouble? If you're going to that much trouble to try to keep your information private, they're going to then look at you from the standpoint of, well, maybe there is some fire here. If there's a little smoke, maybe there's fire. So give them the information and don't try to get crossways. Although it pains me to say that, because I think it's a huge overreach and it's a ridiculous law that has been enacted, just more burden on individuals to stay in compliance with the federal government to address a perceived wrong when there's already ways to do that in our code. You know the way it is. Let's just enact another law and it's going to change people's behavior. Well, I still see murders taking place and people speeding. I don't think it matters how many laws you throw at them at the end of the day, but it just, it's a game you got to play.
All right, so last 2 questions here. One of them goes back to the judgments that you were talking about specifically, those very large judgments. And so She's saying, how do they get those huge judgments? She thought retired individuals are not worth significant money from a lost income point of view. Even if they get punitive damages, they need to have significant actual damages first.
Well, not necessarily, because you're going to be looking at, okay, so you're going to look at pain and suffering as one way to get those damages, right? And then on top of that, you can have punitive damages, just that you impose upon a business for their own negligence. So many times the larger portion of that verdict is going to be on the punitive side. So they're punishing the business itself for its business practices. And then you can have third parties, families, for emotional distress, losing a loved one, loss of consortium. I mean, there's other claims that the family members can make as well that can give rise to damages.
So much intricacies to all of this. We're all learning so much tonight, right? But they can help you, so don't be scared, right?
Yeah.
So as an assisted living manager, do you have any liability? So is there any liability to your manager or somebody that's managing your care home?
Well, there's always going to be liability to the individual, and that's why I showed you that investment side to put your cash inside of a different entity, because the liability might come from, negligent hiring, negligent supervision, not following all of the laws, not, training people properly. And if you're the one that's taken on that responsibility yourself, that could be a way for them to move beyond the corporate veil, if they just show that, a reckless disregard for other people's safety or for the training or the hiring. So yeah, there's always that potential. If you're the one active in the business, that it could escape. But if it's within your position for the company as its manager or officer or director, then standard negligence, it should just stay right there, as long as you're not the one that created the harm. But there's always a risk. I mean, maybe you're working with someone in one of the residents, and maybe you slip and you drop them, and then they're the ones that hit their head, and then a bleed develops and they die. That could be a situation where you're sued personally as well. So you want to make sure you're protecting your other assets.
Perfect. So it looks like those are the last questions that we have. Ari, feel free to reach out to Clint, though. It sounds like you have some great questions for him otherwise. And then I will send you guys over the link. And what email would you prefer everyone to reach out to, Clint, if they were going to ask you questions?
Just first initial, last name, ccoons@alglaw.com.
ccoons@alglaw.com. Perfect. I'll get that sent out to you guys. It is in the chat right now if you want to copy and paste it. But I will also get it sent out in that email with this recording and with that link for that special offer that they offered you guys tonight. And Clint, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. I knew this would be kind of a long, but you guys always have great questions and great answers. So thank you so much for spending the time with us.
All right, guys, take care.